Hey there, everyone. Hey, speakers. Welcome to one more event, a Modern Sales Pros event. I'm so excited about this one. As you can see, audience, we have so many speakers, the best minds in the business here with us today. I don't have a lot of time because I know they have a lot of things to share with us today. So I'm going to jump right in. And audience, while I do my quick introduction here, why don't you go on the chat and let us know where you're calling from? Because we love to see our global footprint of our community. My name is Eduardo. I am a marketing manager here at Modern Sales Pros. And for those of you new here, we are the world's largest and finest community for more than 35,000 members in sales management, leadership, operations, and enablement. And we are all about taking the road less traveled and bringing you along for the journey with us. Our mission is to help you tackle tough questions and discover opportunities you might not even know exist. And we do this through vibrant live sessions like this one you're about to experience. We have an engaging online forum and our must attend summits. And since this year, we started more this year, we are expanding to in person events. So we are definitely coming to a city near you. So check our calendar and you will see that we are traveling all over the country. If you're not part of MSP yet, we will review your details after this event and make sure if you are a good fit to join the community, that you will receive an invitation to join us right after this. But that's enough about MSP. Let's talk about how to enjoy this event. So first of all, let's use the Q&A panel. The speakers are here to answer all your questions. So if you have any questions, just use the Q&A panel on your right-hand side. And this panel is being recorded. So later today, the MSP team will make sure that you will receive a YouTube link on your inbox for all the knowledge that the speakers drop on you today here. Um, and one thing I forgot to mention about MSP is that we have the best partners in business. And today, this event is brought to you by the team at Salesforce, Conga, and Accenture. We have one speaker of each here today, so they're going to give us a little introduction about their companies too. But that's enough from me. I know, audience, you're so excited to hear from the speakers. So I'm going to pass the mic to Pete Kazanji. He's going to be our moderator today. Pete, you can introduce yourself and then ask the speakers to introduce themselves. I'm going to go backstage, take notes, but I'll be back later for some outro notes.
Wonderful. Thanks, Eduardo. I appreciate it. What's up, gentlemen? Are we ready to talk about the convergence of revenue and AI? I am.
Of course.
Yeah. Get excited. Get excited. Hey, folks. My name's Pete Kazanji. I'm the founder of Atrium and also one of the founders of Modern Sales Pros. Atrium makes what we call sales performance management software that helps organizations improve the sales performance and management through the smart application of data. And prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called Talentband that was acquired by Monster Worldwide, and that's where I went from being a first-time founder, seller, sales manager, sales leader, etc., into managing a 600-person new product sales for a 600-person sales organization at Monster Worldwide before founding Atrium. So think a little bit about sales excellence and sales performance management. It's kind of what keeps me up at night, etc. So with me, I've got three fantastic speakers here today. We're going to have folks kind of introduce themselves, let the audience know what they spend their time doing and what their organization does. We're just going to go from left to right here across the slide before we kind of hop into the topics that we're going to be talking about today. So, Brees, why don't you go ahead and kick us off, man?
Thanks, Pete. Brees Reherm. I'm based out in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been at Accenture for a long time now, over 17 years. And in that time at Accenture, I've always done some form of sales transformation. I started focusing on a pricing SSOT project, trying to figure out how to apply better pricing. And then that evolved in pricing to CPQ to deal optimization to sales transformation, and have kind of been in that world ever since. I'm part of our commerce and sales transformation team, and I lead a lot of our kind of overall B2B sales transformation initiatives for Accenture. And obviously, Gen AI and the convergence of kind of revenue and AI is a huge topic. It's been something that's been going on for a number of years now, right? In terms of using some of the more traditional AI models, but it's really gone into a next level with generative AI. So really excited to talk about that with everyone today.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brees. And then Grant, why don't you introduce yourself? You've been working on revenue and documents and things like that for just a hot second now, right?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And so I'm Grant Peterson. I lead product and product strategy for Conga. We are very focused on creating, full end-to-end optimized and automated revenue lifecycle experience. The company basically has some really significant traditional strengths around contract lifecycle management, and CPQ, pricing, quoting, configuration, and e-commerce, and also has a big background in document, sort of generation and signing. And we put that together into a full revenue lifecycle sort of strategic focus. I've been with the company about 4 years. Came to Conga after a 1-year failed retirement. I was unsuccessful as a retiree. I was the CTO at DocuSign for 12 years, where I focused on agreements and drove product development beyond legal research at LexisNexis for 7 years before that. So I've been sort of in this contract and deal space for quite a long time, and I've been excited to be able to sort of focus that in the revenue practice and really bring these ideas together. And AI is a big part of that, so I'm pleased to be here.
Nice. So I think we could say that you are personally responsible for all those closed won deals that were signed by a DocuSign. Is that a fair assessment?
What I can say is I spent many years in very close partnership with Meredith Schmidt. Yes, nice. When she was running revenue operations at Salesforce, I was at the top of her call of her top of her Rolodex to call whenever she wanted. So I have been very involved in the quarterly close.
Nice. There you go. All right, cool. And then last but not least, what we've got, we have a representative from Salesforce. Matthew, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks a bunch, Pete, for having me here, and thanks to the great panel that we have on here today. So my name is Matt Perrin, and I'm a senior product director at Salesforce. And my experience and my expertise at Salesforce is really driven by the diverse experiences I've had coming to date. So I focus on data and infrastructure and regulation, and ultimately how all those pieces come together to help grow our overall ecosystem, not just in North America, but also Europe and ultimately worldwide. So for the past 3 years, I've focused on building out our infrastructure footprint across 17 countries and various other parts of the world. And now really am focused on how can we make our ecosystem and our products as extensible as possible to make it possible for folks like Brees at Accenture or folks like Grant at Conga can really get the most out of our platform. So very much represent our platform community here today, and very excited to kind of talk about what we see in the future of AI and kind of how we hope our partners can extend our platform to really solve their most critical business challenges.
Yeah, and then specifically that infrastructure layer, I think that's branded as Hyperforce.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. Branded as Hyperforce, and it's powering our entire Einstein 1 platform. Really exciting stuff.
So 17 data centers. Did you set them up personally?
I've been to many of the countries, but unfortunately, this is where we lean on our partners to actually set these things up for us. So
got it. Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, as everyone can kind of see, we've got a great group of folks here that think a lot about these various topics. Obviously, documents and revenue workflows don't work without data, and of course, like data, is not all that terribly helpful if it doesn't have a workflow that it's like that it's powering. And of course, driving that transformation doesn't happen on its own. So we have three representatives from folks who can give us perspectives on how to merge those three things together. The first thing I wanted to talk about really quickly was the notion of scaling AI solutions. And specifically what I mean by that is like there's science experiments, and then there's like operationalized, right? Like delivery of like a business process that has been quote unquote transformed. And I thought that one of the best people to kind of like talk about that would be Grant, who obviously is the chief product officer and is the CTO at Conga and the CTO at DocuSign, has kind of seen that firsthand through customers who have adopted applied AI in a production environment, not in a not in a science experiment mode. Maybe it started in a science experiment mode, but then obviously drove ROI and then got to second deployment, third deployment, et cetera, et cetera. So Grant, maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about some examples of organizations who have scaled up AI impacted use cases and how they went about it, the potential challenges and opportunities associated with that.
No, totally. So I think the setup was great in that I think all of these things tend to start with somebody having an idea and they want to see to what extent can AI actually sort of attack that idea, and hopefully they get to the point where being super concerned about what are the repercussions and are there any sort of what are the sort of implications. And so I mean, I do think these things tend to start as an experiment and then progress into a solution most of the time. The question is kind of how and over what period of time. So, what I've seen, I'll focus on CLM because I think it's been on the journey much longer. It's
right.
Looking for perspective. It's easier to draw a perspective from 5 years. And so when you look at that, I think that, the first fundamental challenge that most people are tackling, and certainly that we needed to tackle, is how do you get enough data under management that AI is going to be able to give you a sensible perspective? And so, I'd like to pretend I lived in a world where every contract was sort of generated in a sensible way with reliable metadata, but not true. Every organization has a legacy, and as soon as you get everything under control, you do an acquisition or a merger, and then it's all up in the air again. So, first
bunch of new PDFs show up.
Yeah. Well, if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, a box full of paper shows up. But the first problem is how do you get stuff? How do you get stuff in? And then how do you apply technology to make it essentially reliable? And so that whole notion of discovery and ingestion. I mean, I was in the electronic discovery business years ago at LexisNexis. It's evolved into actually a core element of CLM. So that's the number one thing people are buying. There's a lot of interest in AI, but the number one thing people are actually spending money on is the ability to ingest tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, in a few cases, millions of contracts that may be on paper that are going through OCR or may actually be in files, but have no standard metadata and, frankly, are full of very variant, concepts. And so pulling those clauses out and the key terms and getting a standard metadata, very great problem for AI. So I think that one's live. I mean, there's a ton of companies right now that are doing that, some really major players, and that's just operationalized, in our customer base. But, the stuff that's more currently kind of cutting edge is interesting because people are trying to figure out basically two things. How can you leverage, AI around contracts in order to get advice? Basically, as essentially a complement to their standard workflow. And then the more scary, but maybe more long-term valuable idea is how can you leverage AI to actually take part in the workflow or take part in the practice of contract execution? And so that might look like authoring. It might look like suggesting. It might look like actually making automatic decisions around risk and approvals. And so that's where things get pretty interesting. I think as far as giving people advice, we've become comfortable with that, right? I can give them a co-pilot. I can tell them what we think the risk is. I can make a suggestion as to what the red line should be or why somebody is suggesting a red line or how you should respond versus a playbook. In all of those cases, it's actually pretty easy to leverage AI with the right prompts, the right sort of workflow around it in order to make people more productive. And sort of that's I think the event horizon right now. That's we have, a number of customers in healthcare and life sciences that are activating around that. I mean, everybody wants a co-pilot, but nobody's fully sure how they're going to use it. We'll find out. But, these actual workflows and risk assessment. And so that's the current sort of state of the production art. And so the frontier is authoring. Should you? Can you? should it be suggesting authored language? Do you need to sort of then go over the top with a real legal opinion? Where does the software begin practicing law? And what is even the precedent for that? I mean, it didn't take the bar exam and didn't go to law school, so the software probably should. It's not licensed to practice law. So how do you find, that sort of cut where you're giving advice or maybe even making a suggestion, and then do you actually put really hard guardrails around that, or do you do like your GPS in the car does and says you shouldn't type while you're driving, and then lets you do it, knowing everybody's going to do it? So that's the interesting frontier at the moment. Some companies seem to be more comfortable with the idea that the software is going to author contracts. I will say most customers are not. What I find is a fair amount of relief when you sort of sit down with them and say, I don't think you should actually do this in an unsupervised fashion right now. So and I do think from a customer example perspective, the stuff that people are actively working with us on right now are more assistive things, like find all the obligations in my contract and then help me put a workflow around the obligations so that we can operate on them and deliver things on time and and not breach a contract. So that's the state of the art. I mean, I think authoring is the future. It'll be interesting to see how that fits with regulation and legal practice and all of that. But it does. Their event horizon's like 18 months right now, between a concept before something gets operationalized is sort of what I'm saying.
I mean, I think there's a couple of really interesting points you were hitting on there. I mean, I think there's two things that really come to mind that I'm seeing as well. I think, like you said, Grant, and it's a little bit cliche to say, but the notion of it's not just AI on its own, it's human plus AI. And how can I have generative AI or any sort of AI make my humans more productive? So it's not about taking them out of the loop. It's about enabling them to be more effective, more, faster, more efficient. And I think that's right now where we're really seeing kind of the sweet spot is how can it be the combination? And I also look at it as a combination of almost kind of three factors. There's the human, there's generative AI, and then there's also some of the traditional AI ML models where I think generative AI can be a little bit of the bridge, because sometimes you had great AI models, but the people's ability to use them was challenging, and Gen AI is helping to fill that gap. The other thing that I wanted to add that I thought, going back a little bit to Grant, where you started about some of the data and the contract consolidation, and did they show up with the bin of papers? I've seen where it's like all of the above. They've got the bin of papers. Some of it's in Google Docs, some of it's in a PDF, some of it's on someone's hard drive somewhere nobody knows. But really what you're also getting at too is for a lot of these AI models to work, you need that data consolidation. And you need to drive that data consolidation for the Gen AI to work. And I think there's a foundational step there that sometimes is a really big challenge, but that, clients, make the mistake of skipping sometimes. And so they'll get a Gen AI model working where they've really curated the data, but they haven't done some of the foundational steps to consolidate the data that they need to drive the scale of the model. And that could mean consolidating data into one CRM, one like Salesforce, so it's all there. Consolidating your deals onto one CPQ CLM platform, so that way you've got that data there. But what we've seen on some of the challenges with scale can be they haven't gone through some of those foundational steps to consolidate that data, which kind of really inhibits the ability for the Gen AI models to scale, because and that's the whole point of Gen AI. It's got to be scalable. So I think the notion of being able to consolidate that data, set the foundation, and then that'll really enable the Gen AI models to work in that human plus Gen AI is really where we're seeing clients in the market be effective when they're trying to drive this type of transformation, this type of work.
Got it. So I think the way that Grant kind of documented that or kind of laid it out for us is just the parsing of documentation is kind of the most scaled version of this right now, and then of course we have this suggestion of clauses and kind of the workflow of redlining and what have you, and the kind of the future is authorship as relates to that first use case, which is furthest along the Gartner hype cycle or what have you. consolidation of that data ends up being an extraordinarily important thing, which probably involves a lot of like, where are all these documents, like, going around with like a flashlight, et cetera, where are all these tokens that we need to to do inference on? And then importantly, like, once we discover all those, consolidating those into like some sort of data store where it can all be interrogated, ideally in whatever geography is appropriate, right, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, that's
Amen,
exactly
amen.
right. There's a couple of other things. I mean, there's simple problems in there that are big problems, like deduplicating. When you load these things, you'll find that if you pulled contracts out of email, you may have 50, 60 copies of the same thing, may only be different by a little bit or not at all. So like, there's deduplicating, there's putting back together the hierarchical relationships, and AI, Gen AI has even knocked this forward. I mean, this is still mostly an AI ML problem, but Gen AI has been a massive boost in terms of how fast you can train. So anyway, sorry, go ahead, Matthew.
No,
Yeah,
I
Matt,
think there's
how
some
do
really
how do people consolidate that into like places that they can actually do things with?
Yeah, Pete, I think there's a really interesting change that's going to be occurring in the industry, though, that we as leaders across our organization should be very mindful of, and that's kind of the innovations that Salesforce is bringing to market around our zero data copy network. Right? We know that the ecosystem that exists around the world, people are having data that's stored in multiple large different types of data stores, whether that's a Hadoop cluster or perhaps in Snowflake or any of the large kind of Teradata clusters that a lot of organizations have held over the years. And so if you look across these organizations, they have data that is consolidated, that is deduped oftentimes, that they think is perfect, but still they're struggling with the idea of how do I integrate that data into my overall kind of AI vision. And I think some of the leading edge investments that we're doing and a lot of other companies are doing to try to do what is called like zero data copy, where you actually don't have to copy data from one location to another. You can just read off that data and have a pointer and then use that in your AI inference models and in your actual work that you're trying to do as your organization without having to build all that data engineering pipelines that we've all probably built in our past, right? This is the thing that I think is really going to transform a lot of organizations because they're not going to have to invest in as much in data engineering. And instead, they can focus on things like how do we actually do retrieval augmented generation, RAG, more effectively? How do we actually generate embeddings and use those as the way to actually tune our models or actually drive our business forward? And what do vectors, how do they play into our underlying technology stack and how we're actually going to run our business? So I think that is this idea as we kind of look a little further down the road that's going to be really interesting for our industry to really confront.
Awesome. Wow. Okay. I was not familiar with that. I was more familiar with the notion of like having to like, move these things across the series of tubes in order to like kind of like a truck and then get it all into into a single place where it could be interrogated. But what you're delineating makes it sounds like a lot easier for organizations to do. Kind of changing gears a little bit here. Seller experience. So what we were talking about is like the art of the possible, what's like well-founded, what's like maybe on the cutting edge right now, what's coming in the future. When it comes to changing and impacting seller experience, specifically around pricing strategies and revenue optimization and what have you, I think there's an opportunity there as well. I think Brees, you wanted to kind of share some kind of like insights around that. Maybe you can kind of share that and we can get others folks as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, I love the point that Matt made. And I think the theme of like, there's where we're at now and then where the technology is going also applies to this domain as well. When we're looking at like, how do I make the seller experience better? Because there's, I've found that being pragmatic about what can the technology do today and technology in a broader sense, and also where is it going, and understanding and delineating between both becomes really important, especially when you're talking about some of the seller experience and applying it to kind of some of the pricing strategies and revenue and growth models, right? What we've been looking at and what we've been seeing both internally and with our clients is the notion of start by finding the hotspots of what are the use cases that a seller might be experiencing multiple times a week, multiple times a day, that you can make a lot easier. And where you can also make the life of a seller or sales operations easier, where you can start using chat as the interface and as the experience for generative AI, right? And so, you can look at very simple things that are hotspots that people find every day, like I need to look up the lead for an account. Well, for a lot of clients and even Accenture, that might take 10 different clicks. But I would love to just be in my chat and be like, hey, who's the lead for the account? And have the bot just pull that up and have that be part of the generative AI experience, right? When you then even take that to someone's trying to prep for a meeting and your seller is getting ready for a meeting and they're saying, hey, help me to prepare for this meeting with this customer. And you're able to generate in real time, here's what their current spend is. Here's their usage data and the telemetry data against their spend. Hey, by the way, they've got a case open. To me, it's a lot of things that we would talk about in the past around customer 360, which were really successful and were enabled. But now you can also make it to the next level where you're just doing it in chat and it's being generated in real time and served up to you on a silver plate, right? And on the revenue, the number of deals where we see correlations between deal velocity and deal response time and deal win rates is unbelievable. Like, time kills all deals and no customer wants to wait for a deal. Well, now if I take that a step further, how often is it, hey, you're waiting for someone to approve a deal and they didn't go to log in to their CRM or their deal tool to then go approve that deal? Well, how much easier is it, again, if you can use generative AI and chat, say, hey, I need this deal approved. Boom, it popped up. Oh, yeah, I know that deal. Yes, approved. Boom, done. And you're combining generative AI, chat, workflow, CPQ or CLM, depending on where the approval's sitting. You're bringing all that together in a chat experience to make your sellers more efficient, more effective, and you're actually able to drive revenue growth off of that, right? Because now I'm winning more deals because my deals are getting approved faster, and that's directly impacting your kind of revenue growth, right? The last use case that I'm really excited about, which is happening now, I'd put it more in the near future concept, is again, where you're able to use chat or generative AI as the bridge for assisting sellers as part of their deals. Guided selling is such a critical aspect of any CPQ transformation, and being able to use AI to help drive that guided selling, to really be able to do cross sell, upsell, or instead of trying to navigate some of the the price guidance, just say, hey, apply the right price so that I can go win this deal, and boom, it does it for you. Again, those are the techniques where you're doing those really focused use cases, where you're going after those hot spots that are impacting your sellers every day, that are impacting your deals every day, where it's that human plus AI, where you're making them more efficient and more effective, and you're using chat to help drive that experience. Those are the very tangible things that we're seeing, today, that are not only, some of the most effective AI use cases, but are also having that tangible impact on revenue. Because you can see, oh, look, our deal win rate went up because our deals are getting approved faster, and that's driving more revenue and more revenue growth. So those are the key items there.
Yeah, you were talking about finding the specific use cases for the revenue operations folks who are joining us. There's nothing better for finding that than like desk side, right? Like, I mean, it's essentially like seller ethnography, or like, putting on your like Frederick Winslow Taylor hat and like doing a little time and motion study, like next to a seller, and like you'll be shocked how many like absolutely like insane workflows you discover. And you know we don't have anyone from Salesforce like AI here today, but a lot of the like kind of like lockdown prompts, or I forget what the product marketing term is for them, but like if folks haven't watched the the Salesforce like Trailblazer stuff on kind of AI, like AI functionality. I kind of think of it as like, the AI prompts, or like generative AI prompts are now kind of like almost like a first class citizen, along with like, well, back in the day it used to be workflow rules and then flows and whatever. And so now, like, if you find something, you're like, hey, I'm on a contact object, and can you prepare me for this meeting or whatever? Cool. Let's like, pull that from the various fields, throw it in put it in a lockdown prompt that does a merge, and then it like gives me a report across like the things that Brees was saying earlier. And like that can be, there's all sorts of manners, like all sorts of use cases there. And then of course, like there's very much like contract centric ones as well. So if folks haven't checked out those, like kind of the documentation and the content on that, like there are broader subsets of use cases beyond pure kind of like contract stuff, pricing stuff, et cetera, which obviously are really important as well. Matt or Grant, did you have kind of things that you wanted to add around like seller experience impacts of these sort of things, Matt?
Well, I'll just follow up in terms of what we're seeing actually come together for Dreamforce this year, and then I'll have Grant kind of fill in what he sees from the contract side. But on this idea of what we're seeing partners actually build across our ecosystem, being able to use our Einstein Copilot and essentially to update records in real time from that actual Copilot interface, right? And then to say, hey, I need a proposal based on the template that I already have built out with my organization, and then have that proposal built in real time, and then be able to email it to your seniors, email it for all the approvers. We're seeing partners build that out today into production with real working software. And so we're going to be showing a lot of that at Dreamforce just in a few weeks. So really, really like valuable software is being built right now.
Don't ruin any surprises. We don't need to get in trouble.
Yeah, no, this is all going to come out. This is within our partner community. It's a really exciting thing.
Nice. Grant, was there anything you wanted to add on that topic before we move on?
I just wanted to agree. I think basically that really the really interesting change that's happening, with the confluence of people doing a better job of having a sort of a complete and holistic data set, in this case around the full revenue experience, which includes lots of aspects, everything from fulfillment to obligations to, what you're selling in the first place to what you've agreed to. Being able to take all that and then use it in a way that wasn't prescribed is really liberating. I mean, the kinds of insights that are possible, and the velocity at which, sort of new views can be created is really the big exciting change. And so, the step one, you have to have access to the right data. But assuming you do gain access to the right data, through some decent engineering and reasonable tools, you can then do incredibly interesting things that couldn't be done before. Like, what are the key risks in this particular contract as relates to the product that the person bought that might be renewing, where it's being underutilized, where the state of the art today, people don't talk enough about renewals, but the state of the art in a renewal today is you look a couple of months before the renewal's coming up to see what might be a problem. Well, you don't need to do that. It's the system can know. The system can say, hey, this customer is not utilizing enough, and they are using a product that's been replaced with a product that tends to have higher utilization, and their contract is going to probably churn. Like these are the kinds. This is really what Gen AI does that humans can't. It can integrate a massive amount of data in a way that we can't. And it can sort of draw amazing correlations that we would never make because we don't have the ability to handle the magnitude of data.
That would be a pretty amazing join, right? So the opportunity product, right? Opportunity product plus opportunity product plus contract plus usage data on a feature basis that joins. Yeah. I mean, that'd be pretty.
Well, here's the beauty. Here's the beauty. You don't have to join it. That's
it's a sloppy join with an LLM.
Yeah, the LLM does that much better than SQL ever would have. But
exactly.
But honestly, it's not a fantasy. This is just possible now.
Yeah, and I think it also gets to the driving the efficiency and effectiveness, because today a lot of people will achieve that outcome by having humans try to comb through large amounts of data to figure out like what's the proactive account engagement that needs to happen to avoid that churn, right? And like Grant said, humans aren't great at it. Like attention to detail isn't our forte. But being able to use that generative AI and some of the AI to say, hey, we can see based on the data, someone needs to look here and put in a plan to go address some of the churn risk. Again, those are things that are happening now, and also even tied to like, how do you then drive revenue growth off of that? How do you take that identification and actually turn it into an opportunity to be proactive with your customers? Those are very real, leading edge, but very real use cases that we're seeing in the market.
Yeah, I think that Brees, what you just said about like humans aren't necessarily great at having amazing attention to detail, definitely true. People don't necessarily like to admit it. I was driving around in a self-driving car this morning, visiting a customer, and the car did not, it did not get distracted by its phone. It did not get angry about being cut off. It was very, it was very rigorous. And I think that's the first thing, is the high reliability of these, derived insights, right? Like, repeatability and consistency. The LLM, although it is not purely deterministic, it definitely will do the thing again and again and again and again. That's the first thing. And then also the fact that it's automated and leveraged makes it such that now you can apply what historically would have been synthesis or analysis that would have been only used for more rarefied use cases, right? As Grant was kind of saying, like, okay, maybe only once at the 60-day mark or 90 T-minus 90-day mark from renewal or whatever, and then maybe moreover only for contracts above $50,000 of ARR or $100,000 of ARR or whatever. Now these synthesis and these analyses can be done recurrently at on a monthly basis, and like a week, bi-weekly basis. Probably don't want to overwhelm the human who's like downstream consuming it in order to validate it, but like, maybe even a weekly basis, and dropping that like level of bespoke, historically bespoke white glove synthesis and analysis that would have been only at the $50,000 or $100,000. Now we can drop it down to $25,000 accounts. Now we can drop it down to $15,000 accounts, et cetera, et cetera.
Or better yet, you can decide by, if it's less than a $25,000 account, let it make the decision. Send out an offer, send out a renewal with a different product. I mean, you can decide, when you put those guardrails around it, where do you want to actually white glove it on top of the recommendation? Where do you just want to let it run? I mean, let it rip. I mean, those are all valid things to do.
Well, we're gonna need an AI opinion from your AI lawyer that's not licensed for law on that.
I was on the sales
on
side.
whether or not we're allowed to do that. Okay.
I was talking on the sales side. The legal side was a little more cautious.
No, we need an opinion from the AI lawyer about the sales side there. Cool. So kind of moving on here. One of the things that I think Grant did a good job kind of like delineating earlier as relates to CLM, what's a scaled use case right now? What's an emerging use case? Maybe what's a more futuristic use case? What I thought we can maybe talk about is, more broadly than that, what are some use cases that are ready for operationalization? Like obviously we talked about e-discovery and or e-discovery, and also kind of like clause identification, parsing. I don't know what the terse phrase for that would be, like metadata derivation is obviously like a very scaled example there, ready for operationalization right now. Maybe we can kind of share with the audience some other examples of use cases that are ready to rock, that are like reliable, that we've seen in the market. Maybe Brees, since obviously you interface with like a lot of organizations that are deploying this right now, maybe you can kind of share some examples there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think before you get into the specific use cases, I think thematically there's a couple like criteria that you tend to look at of where do you have the data in place, where do you also have a degree of process like consistency and repeatability, right? If you're trying to do this on 30 different variations of a process or an experience, it's going to struggle because it's going to have to learn each one separately, right? So I'd say think about some of the criteria. Where do I have the the technology, the data, and the process kind of standardization in place to be able to do that? And then I think some of the very real use cases are, you start with the most basic that everybody's starting to get used to. I've got the AI meeting note taker who can take all the meeting notes and send those out, right? Then you have the help me prep for my meeting, serve up the data. Do they have
pre-call planner?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Slam
exactly.
dunk, right?
Yeah. Slam dunk. Then I think some of the things around like help me approve my deal. Anything where you're saying like, hey, I need to comb through vast amounts of data. And be able to then serve that up more in a chat-based interface where I'm ask a question, get the answer, and then serve up all the data that I'm looking for is definitely real key. And then the other one that to give credit to Matt and put a point of emphasis on it, because it's something, especially as a consultant, we live and breathe every day, is you get an RFP and we got to do a proposal generation. And like,
can you win this business for me?
Yeah. Or, my personal favorite is a client was like, oh, we decided to send this RFP out like 2 days before a big holiday or vacation, and it's due the day after the vacation. I don't want to count how many times I've been there, but being able to use like some proposal generation tools is something that is happening now and is very real and very effective. So those are some of the key or kind of big use cases that we're seeing that we're implementing in our business. And then obviously, again, both for me and for our clients, a lot of the contract generation, like you already have the clauses defined. Hey, I need a contract, generate that contract for me, at least get me that baseline starting point that I'm editing and updating. So a lot of those use cases where it's, the generative AI and the AI models are really making the humans more effective, prompted by chat. We're seeing a lot of traction there we're seeing a lot of, like I said, we're seeing a lot of traction there. It's really effective. It's working today. I think where people sometimes get tripped up is that they get a little bit overly ambitious of, I need an AI to build a deal for me. And those things are more complex and more down the line.
Grant's like, au contraire, I have it operating on my local right now. Ready? Want a demo?
No.
Grant, what sort of use cases have you seen?
I'm with Reese on this. It's not ready for that, but we're getting there.
What other use cases have you seen that are ready for production?
We're sort of at the point where, moving away from the contracts for a second, looking at the revenue side of things, most of it is signals. Where people, there's two things that people are doing rationally. They're using Copilot. So I think Matthew can tell you a ton about that. The other thing in that you don't know how exactly that's going to be used, but in terms of the things that we're preforming, we're sort of using the same tech, and these are sort of just prefabricated signals. Show me accounts where we've sort of, under collected revenue. Show me accounts where we, sort of like over discounted. Show me opportunities where things are being underutilized and, might churn. So churn risk detection, early renewal detection, requote detection. They're all targeted, but the generative toolkit makes them much easier to put together. I mean, you spend a week or two, you iron out the prompts, you get the data right, and bam, you have a new feature. So that's kind of ready. I mean, it's if you can go in the Copilot window and do it by hand, you can routinize it and make it part of your product experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Matt, did you have anything you wanted to add, like specific use cases that require, like consolidated data or non-consolidated virtual data with pointers?
I mean, and I'm mostly just in my role really excited about the ecosystem that's coming up around this. I mean, when large organizations who hold vast troves of data start to make their data available for others in a federated way, where we can actually start to perhaps have embeddings that are shared, oftentimes in a compliant way with regulation. Thinking about that, to me, is really where I'm seeing a lot of green shoots. A lot of companies are saying, hey, we have all this data that is clean, that is great to use, but we don't know how to use it. We don't know how to license it. We don't know how to make it usable in a in an enterprise sense. And so I think if we can crack that big nut, I think there's going to be some really interesting things that can cascade down to the rest of this ecosystem.
Nice. Cool. And then, so I mean, the last topic I want to cover here in the last 5 to 7 minutes or so is, what role does data and specifically data integration play in facilitating this, the effectiveness of these AI solutions there? And Matt, I know that you think about this quite a bit. So maybe you can share a little bit about how organizations are going about doing that, and things that people should look out for in order to get their data right for these different use cases.
Yeah, I think this is really a hard challenge, and I actually look at it in 2 time scales. The one that I face all day long, and I think Grant has faced this in his world as well, is how do customers do this with trust and without violating laws and following their company policies, and making sure ultimately at the end of the day, their customers and their customers' customers trust them as an organization to share their data with these groups. That's something that we're confronting a lot, and I suspect everyone in the industry is thinking about that right now. So the more we can put metadata tags on certain types of data, the more we can have clear regulations on how and when we can use certain types of data for AI. I think there's some really important things that are going to be happening in the short term. Then you can deal with, okay, how am I going to use retrieval augmented generation in order to create an embedding? How am I going to take unstructured data versus structured data to actually generate some sort of response or build an application, an AI application that I can use in my business? I think that's the short term, and we're going to solve it. It's just going to be a little bit muddy until we get there. What I'm thinking about kind of longer term, though, is what we have talked about in this entire conversation is essentially enterprise level or company level applications, right? Company level co-pilots that people in your organizations are using to follow your own company standards. What I think is going to increasingly be happening is we're going to have more and more agents, like all of these digital assistants, all of these digital agents, and everyone is going to become a manager. So you're going to have agents that you build out in order to work within your specific workflow. These are going to be tuned to your specific customers, tuned to the specific types of deals that you work on, tuned to your specific expertise. And instead of being faced with this world where, hey, we don't necessarily have the money in order to hire another person to have that experience, you can take someone who's skilled in turning up digital agents to actually gin this up, and then you can actually have an entire new, perhaps, line of business that you can tackle because you've built out a digital agent. And so everyone becomes a manager, and instead of just being an individual contributor in this world, if we can crack this nut of data integration and we can really get to this point where digital assistants and digital workers and agents themselves are just part of what we do.
Which I think is another thing that is going to be a hot topic at Dreamforce. I follow Mark Benioff on Twitter, and he's been tweeting quite a bit about agents, sales agents, and service agents here for a second. So makes sense, but doesn't work if you don't have the data nice and integrated for it to join across. Sorry,
100%.
Messy join across. Grant, as somebody who kind of sees this a lot, any kind of guidance you would provide on that data integration challenge?
I just want to return to a point that Matt made because it's massive. And so you said one teeny thing that I might disagree with, but I'm not certain, which is hopefully everybody's focused on these issues of safety, regulatory protection, policy. And I'm not so sure. They should be.
Ooh. Okay.
They should be. So I do see, a pretty broad spectrum of people that, some companies are being pretty cavalier in my opinion. And, a few of them have had some missteps. Others are being more cautious. I think we're on the trying to go as fast as possible, but be very cautious side of that equation. So I'm 100% with you. I do think that's going to be fundamentally one of the make or break issues. And frankly, companies are not going to do this at scale if that doesn't get solved right. So I think, getting the data protection, getting the confidentiality, getting the appropriate use, getting, rights administration and license, sort of respecting license and copyright. These are all complicated issues that frankly are going to play out over the next 5 years. This is really the right thing to be thinking about. Well, like on one end, you want to be going fast and finding, all of the amazing new capabilities. On the other hand, we don't want to burn down trust or really create serious missteps that would stop the technology. So getting that right, not easy, but the right thing to be focused on.
Amen.
Yeah, and usually it's those digital transformation consultants who are, pushing the boundaries and getting us into trouble. Just kidding, Breeze. So would you have any would you have any guidance around running fast enough, but at the same time not messing yourself up, and adopting technology and business opportunity at the right pace to that it doesn't necessarily get you in hot water?
I would say just make sure that it's part of your conversation in a very fundamental way. On one hand, I've had a front row seat for the last 2 years. The epic pressure to use this as a marketing opportunity rather than taking it on as a value opportunity to create a beautiful future. There's a lot of pressure, like everybody wants to say that they're leading here. And so like have the right partners, have the right philosophy, have the right principles, have the right partners, have the right technology, and don't cut corners. Like you can do some pretty bold experiments, but before you take it live, get the details right.
Yeah. Breeze, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Don't believe everything you see, somebody say. There's a lot of nonsense out there, and there's also a lot of truth. And finding the difference is not easy.
Breeze, was there anything you wanted to add to that before we wrap?
Well, for once as a consultant, I'll be brief. I'll say, I think Grant said it best. Don't cut the corners. I think that also aligns to the notion of like set the foundation, get the processes right, get the policies right, make sure you're intentional about the conversation, and if you do those things, you get the foundation. You don't cut corners. I think it's a key topic, but very navigatable.
Nice. Wonderful. Well, I think those were the topics that we wanted to cover, but I think it was a wide-ranging conversation that helps us kind of understand where there are opportunities with respect to AI and revenue kind of mixing together here. I really enjoyed the various perspectives that we had here from everybody, whether it's the document processing, contract lifecycle management, pricing, etc., from the Conga side of the house, the data governance and kind of like harmonization and centralization integration from Salesforce, and of course Accenture's perspective as relates to mixing it all together and making it actually come to life. So gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate it. There's Eduardo. Eduardo, was there anything that we needed to cover?
That is all. I want to say thank you so much for the speakers for the great session. And also thank you to our partners, Salesforce, Conga, and Accenture. If you like what the speakers said today, there's a request button with our sponsors at the top of this page. Make sure to click and their team can get in touch with you later today. While the speakers and I hang out backstage, the team and Modern Sales Pros will make sure that your audience receive the link for this recording in your inbox later today, and also it will be available in our website. Speakers, thank you so much. This was a great session. I hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.